Back here on the Steam Room, the world's second most popular podcast. Ernie Johnson along with Charles Barkley
and a special guest.
Another special guest. This show is just mind-boggling sometimes when we're able to wrangle these guests. And now it's Tim Grover, who was I don't know the best way, Charles, to describe, trainer to the elite, trainer to the stars. How would you describe Tim Grover?
Trainer to the best bodies in sports I've ever seen. And I'm not saying
even yours.
No. I didn't get to work with Tim until I was over the hill. But I look at the bodies he's worked with. And like I said, I'm not just saying this because he's on the show. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, I would say there's never been two players who had more perfectly proportioned bodies, strength, quickness, power, that combination. That's the truth.
So, Tim, welcome to the Steam Room. Please keep your towel on. And thanks for taking time with us, man. We're all about, as the whole sporting world is about this Last Dance. And we've seen you featured prominently in these episodes as Michael's trainer. How did this all start way back when you first met Michael?
Well, it started back in '89. So the story was Michael was tired of taking the physical abuse from the Detroit Pistons, and there was a small article in a local newspaper. I was like, oh yeah, well, why not? I had already finished my master's degree in exercise science, so I was like, all right, let me go out and write some letters. So I wrote 14 letters to the Chicago Bulls.
And you're what, 25 years old at this time? 24, 25?
25, yes. So I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and send these letters out. This was back then, no emails, no anything. So I wrote, the one person I did not write a letter to was Michael. I was like, okay, the organization is going to they're going to keep an eye on him. They'll find somebody, they'll find something for him. And I get a call back a couple of days later, and it's the team athletic trainer, Mark Feil, during that time, and the team physician, John Heffron. And they said, one player is interested in hiring in your services. So we'd like to meet with you. So I met with them on and off for literally 3 months, going back and forth. They wanted to see if I knew what I was talking about, what my philosophies were, what my strategy was. And then after like a 3-month process, they said one day, there's like, hey, listen, we want you to meet the client at the house. And I said, all right. So they gave me the address. I drove up there. I rang the doorbell. And this was when you could literally walk up to his house. I rang the doorbell, and Michael Jordan answered the door. I know it was going to be him.
You had no idea who this was. You're just going to an address.
Yeah, I was just going to an address. He opened the door. I was like, okay. So, and here's the thing. I'm wearing a pair of Converse. So, Charles and everyone knows how Michael is about the brand and Nike and so forth. So the first thing that comes in my head, I was like, okay, do I take off my shoes or do I leave them on? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take them off. And I took them off. I had a big old hole in my sock too.
Way to make a good first impression.
Yeah,
man.
Exactly. But I'm like, what's worse, going in with Converse or going in with a pair with socks that have holes in it? I was like, let's go with the socks that have holes in it.
Tell people exactly what your program is, because there's a gazillion trainers. Explain your working out theory.
My working out theory first is to make the athlete as less injury prone as possible. That's the first thing. Everybody talks about, we need them to jump higher, we need them to be stronger, we need them to be faster. Well, if you do those things, you're actually increasing the athlete's chances of becoming injured. Each sport has muscles, tendons, and ligaments, joints that are used more frequently than others. The movement patterns of a baseball player are different than a football player, hockey player, and a basketball player. So let's address the areas that are used the most and make those things as bulletproof as possible. By just doing that alone, you automatically make the athlete better. Because what happens is funny, Charles, you've played at the highest level. All right. There's certain moves you do, certain jumps that you do that you don't always land on two legs. Sometimes you land on one, you jump off of one, you go. So there's always muscles and a side of your body that's always used more in a sport than you would think. And I pay attention to those little details, and I develop a program around those things. Okay, this person lands this during a practice or during a game. He lands this much on his right leg. He lands this much on his left leg. He has a tendency to turn over his left shoulder. He has a tendency to turn over his right shoulder. So you pay attention to all those details. Once you do those things, you also have to teach the athlete how to stop. Everybody teaches them how to go, but most of your injuries in sports are not on the go. They're on the plant or the stop. When you're changing directions, when you're getting ready to plant to go up for a jump. So programs are designed to make athletes go. So they have Ferrari engines and they're dealing with a lower end vehicle brakes. So if you're going to have acceleration, you have to have the same kind of deceleration. And that's what a lot of athletes and trainers miss out on.
Tim, these days with technology, obviously, I mean, everything can be charted. I mean, you talk about how many miles a guy runs in the course of a game, how much ground he covers, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, you got to be honest with me. Back then, the story goes that you would count Michael's steps, that
Yes.
you would watch him play and you would count his steps.
Yes. So what I would do is I couldn't do it at the game. We're all old enough to know what a Betamax is and what a VHS machine is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So before I would go to the game, you get one of those tapes, you can buy them. They either had 2 hours worth of recording, 4 hours or 6 hours worth of recording. So right before I would leave, I would set the tape, I would put it in, and I would record it on the slowest speed. So, at the game, obviously I can't keep looking down and keep charting down. So at the game, I'm watching what's going on. I'm seeing what's happening. I would jot a few notes. Then after the game, after we're done, after he's done with his treatment and all this other stuff, I come home that same night. I rewatch the game. I rewatch his portions again, because I never worked for the organization. So I was never privy to be able to hey, can I get a game film of just Michael? They were never going to do that.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Even though you were doing this for the franchise meal ticket, it was like, but don't ask for anything else.
Ernie, it was unbelievable. But see, the one thing special about Michael was he was just he goes, listen, if I start asking for these things for you, then that's going to open up the door for everybody else who has a trainer. He goes, so I don't want to create that. He goes, you have the job of being able to figure this out. So I said, don't worry about it. I can figure that out. So I would literally come home, I would watch the game, and that would allow me to prepare for his workout the next day. So every time he played, and I would also ask him about what he did in practice, I would adjust the workout accordingly to how he did, how many minutes he played, how many steps he took, whether he cut left, whether he cut right. So all the stuff. So I was the original Fitbit.
Tell everybody about the Breakfast Club.
Well, the Breakfast Club started with, Michael, he knew certain players that he needed to rely on a daily basis. And obviously Scotty was one of them. So what Michael was doing, so he goes, I need to make sure Scotty's in the best condition and the best health possible. I'm going to have him work out with me during my times. And then when Ron Harper came, Ron was extremely athletic with his days in Cleveland. Then he had his injury with his ACL. My personal opinion was it wasn't done as best as it could have been done. So I went up to Michael and said, Michael, I really think I can, get him close to back to where he was, or at least be performing at a high level to help you win. So he goes, go talk to him. I actually talked to Ron, and Ron said he was interested. So I told Michael, these are the people that are going to come working out. So every single morning, even on game day, and this was a crucial part, even on game day, we would work out at anywhere from 5 a.m., 6 a.m., or 7 a.m. Michael would pick the times, and all three of those individuals were there. They never missed a workout, never missed a workout. I had our core program that we would all do, but then each individual had different needs. And that was the one thing that I did. You can't take a team of 12, 15 individuals and train them all the same way. Everybody has individual needs. So my programs were designed for the individuals. I would work them out, and then I would pay attention to all the individual needs. Then afterwards, they would go upstairs, they'd have breakfast, talk some trash, do whatever they need to do, watch some game film or whatever, and they would go to practice. It was a year-round process from the Off season basically started from Labor Day all the way until the last game of the championship run.
When did you come up with this theory to even lift even on game days? Because I think that was the one thing that I learned when I got to meet you later in my career. Like, what's the theory on lifting on game days?
So what happens is, your muscles have a tendency to go back to a state that they're comfortable in. So you guys play a lot of games. Your schedule is 82 regular season games, plus the preseason games, plus the playoffs. So you can get all the way up to 100. You can always get up to 100 games. All right. And back then, you played every single game. If you worked out only on non-game day, including all the travel that you had to do, I could never maintain the strength level that you got during the off season or that you started during the preseason. That's more detrimental to an athlete's ability to stay injury-free when you have a constant fluctuation of the strength of a particular muscle, particular joint, a particular ligament, particular tendon. So you had to work out on game day.
1997, Game 5, NBA Finals, the flu game. Is this stomach flu? Is this like the regular flu? Is it a combination of the two? And did you buy the pizza that made him sick?
I didn't buy the pizza, but I ordered the pizza. Well, actually, you know what, Ernie? I'd probably say I probably did buy the pizza because I'm the ones that gave the guys the money at the door. We stayed in Park City, and back then, Park City wasn't what Park City is now. The hotel we stayed in, the room service was done at like 9:30. There was no restaurants open, and Michael was hungry. He was like, "Hey," he goes, "All right, so it's my job to find him something to eat." So I'm like, "All right, listen, the only thing I can find is a pizza place." He goes, "Well, order me a pizza." I ordered the pizza, and then about an hour later, and Charles knows this. Listen, a lot of you guys stay under aliases when you travel, but it's so easy to figure out what that alias is. They already knew who the room was. So literally when I opened the door, there's 5 guys there to deliver one pizza. And they're all thinking they're going to be able to come in. And I'm like, no, you guys stay right there. So I take the pizza, I give them their money, and then I close the door and I look at this and I tell Michael, man, I got a bad feeling about this. And Michael used a few choice words, which I'm not going to share on this I'm going to share on this podcast. I put the pizza down. Now, I was in the room. Michael was in the room. George Kohler was in the room. And a couple of security people. He was the only one that ate. Nobody else ate.
Wow.
There was no, and then he was perfectly fine up till that time. I mean, there was no symptoms before. There was no symptom. I mean, it was just like, when a flu hits, you start to feel a little bit. You start to feel some achiness or something going on. There was nothing there. I get a call in my room about 3 a.m. And it's George. George says, "Hey, man, come to MJ's room right now." So I come to MJ's room, and he's literally curled up on the sofa in a fetal position. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, all right, what's going on? He's giving me all this. He's giving me all the things that's going on. And I'm like, Michael, we got to get you to throw up. I said, that's the start of it. We got to get you to throw up. We got to get some fluids back in your body. And then, by then the team physician back then had shown up, and he said he was going to play. He goes, "Just get me standing. I will do the rest." And the only thing I had told Michael, I said, "Michael, if you're going to play or when you're going to play," I said, "you got to keep going." I said, "The worst thing that can happen is you come out and rest for a long period of time. However Phil normally uses you or whatever, how you're going to play in the game, depending on what the score is and the outcome, you have to stick to that game plan."
So, looking at The Last Dance, there's 3 transformations that you gave Michael. Number one, when you gave him the awesome body after he lost to the Pistons a few years in a row. When he told you he wanted to play baseball, you're like, that's a whole different body set, mindset. And then when he came back after baseball, which of those 3 things was the hardest for you?
The hardest transition for me was making the baseball body. That was a difficult transformation because even though he wasn't new to the sport, so every time the hitting instructor or the throwing coach or whatever would make an adjustment in his swing, the way he threw, the way he stepped, forced me to make an adjustment. So every time they was like, okay, Michael, this is where we want the bat position. This is where we want your wrist position. This is where we want your feet. 3 days later, they would make another adjustment, which would force me to make another adjustment. I had to constantly make adjustments. In his basketball game, those things were pretty much innate in his system. They were already instinctive. The one thing I did tell him, I was just like, I don't feel there's enough time for your body to go back to doing what it was doing. And everybody got excited when he was in the, when he had the double nickel against the Knicks, and they were like, oh man, he's back. But if you knew Michael and you knew his game and you paid attention to the details as I did, you could see the different nuances that they just weren't there. And even though he was still playing at probably 85% better than all the current players during that time, I could still see the nuances that weren't there to allow him to be the Michael Jordan that we knew.
Last question for me, Tim, is this. What'll be the lasting image, the lasting memory you have of training Chuck?
I was fortunate enough for him to let me be part of the rehab of his quadricep tendon tear. And this was the craziest thing. I remember us going to the health club, and his leg was in an immobilizer. So, he could still hop around on his crutches and so forth. And the gym where we went to had a basketball court. And Charles says, grab me a basketball. I don't even know if he remembers this. I'm like, man, Charles, I don't want you on the basketball court. He goes, grab me a basketball. I'm not exaggerating. And I've told this story in the book, Relentless. He took the basketball off of one leg. And remember, the other leg's in an immobilizer. He's just coming off of, I don't know how many weeks of surgeries. He dunked the basketball with two hands off of one leg, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 10 times in a row.
I wish I had got you early in my career, to be honest with you. You got me at the end. You've been great for our sport, brother, and I love you. Just keep doing your thing.
Thank you, gentlemen. Listen, I respect both of you for not only what you guys have done in your careers, with your families, everything. And you guys ever need anything from me, I'm a phone call away. You know that.
We really appreciate it, and just echo what Charles has had to say about the work you've done throughout your career, man, and you've been a real credit.
Thank you. Hey, coming from you two means everything.